Well, welcome everyone to today's episode of TMI Advice You Didn't Want. Today we're going to dive into more astrology, and the big thing right now is the fact that Pluto just moved into Aquarius, and there's actually a lot of controversy over that, which is kind of surprising. I learned a lot about astrology this morning that I didn't know, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So, in case we haven't met, my name is Karen.
My name is Ashley, and I don't know, I like this topic. Like I don't know a lot about astrology, but like the little tidbits that I've heard and read and my friend has told me about, I'm really excited about Pluto being in Aquarius if that's what's happening.
Yeah, that's the question. Is it actually what's happening? Because you sent me what was it, a reel or a TikTok? I can't remember. About hey, we should talk about this, and I was like, yeah, I've been seeing that all over my For You feed on TikTok too, where everybody's talking about how Pluto has moved into Aquarius. Well, yesterday, one of my friends who is a big astrologer, like she knows her crap, right? Like she actually she like brings people, and she like as her business she does their chart reading and everything. And so on Facebook yesterday I was scrolling and I saw where she was saying that Pluto is not actually in Aquarius yet. And it got me like, wait, what? What in the world? It kind of got me like, I have no idea what that even means. Like, why are
Yeah.
all these people saying that Pluto is in Aquarius and this is so exciting? And now my other friend is saying that Pluto is not in Aquarius. First of all, maybe we should talk about the importance, because you know more about this than I do, Ashley, the importance of Pluto being in Aquarius.
hmm Well, so my understanding is the last time that Pluto was in Aquarius, that's when we had like the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and like five other revolutions. And so it's supposed to be like turning over what doesn't work anymore and like what's no longer serving us and starting like fresh. And so, like, obviously, with the American Revolution, it's like this isn't serving us anymore. We want to completely get rid of this person, or this not person, but I don't know the American history very well as a Canadian. But we don't want to run our government this way. We want it to be this way. And that's also what came with like the industrial age, right? And that completely changed everything for everyone in North America. So, yeah, so Pluto is a lot about change and it's going to be slow change. And it's also, or Pluto going into Aquarius is a lot about change, slow change, releasing what's no longer serving us, and a lot about like creativity and innovation. So, a lot of people are talking about how it's going to have a lot to do with AI. There's going to be a lot of system overhauls, just a lot of changes. And like with what we see with like what Elon Musk is doing with Trump now in as your president, and what I've heard about JFK Jr. Like to me, that all makes sense and that's all lining up. Um, I have friends that are investing into like silvers and golds because of what's going to happen with our currency and how Trump is looking to have it be a gold standard and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not an expert on any of that, but that all makes sense for Pluto moving into Aquarius. So having like a cryptocurrency backed by gold maybe, or just a gold standard. I don't know. Those are just some things that people are saying. So a lot more about innovation, a lot more about getting rid of old systems that don't serve us, like with big pharma and the FDA and all that kind of stuff. I see a lot of big things happening, and yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, like only time really can tell what's actually going to happen on this linear timeline that we're living on, right? Because like I just came back from a Dr. Joe event and we were very heavily talking about how all things are happening right now. Period, end of story. There is no timeline. That's not a real thing. And
Yeah.
so but astrology and how we work in this three dimension does work on time. And so one thing that my friend was saying in this Facebook post that really kind of confused a lot of people But she said that she works off of, what is this, sidereal or true sky astrology are the two that she works off of. And she says that in that astrology, Pluto has moved into Capricorn in 2020. So it's still currently in Capricorn, is what she is saying. And she said that her star charts, she's working off of the sidereal or astrology or the true sky astrology.
Yeah.
But that most people, when they're talking about Pluto moving into Aquarius, are actually working off of Western astrology, which I didn't know that there's like 9 different types of astrology. Like, I had no idea. And the thing that's crazy to me is that nobody can really agree on it, which kind of, in my opinion, makes me be like, does it really matter?
Well, and I think that at the end of the day, it's just like we've said, like if you put too much into one thing, it doesn't work. And also if you take too little out of one thing, like, like I used to be a big fan of reading like the newspaper horoscope. So you have your daily horoscope and like it's a general horoscope based on your sun sign. And it's like very general, very like your sun sign's not really your most accurate sign. Like I think like you want if you're going to be going off of stuff, you should be going off of your rising sign. But then it's all encompassing too. Like you want to be looking at your big three. And so for me, if you take too small of a sliver, it's the same thing with Christianity. Like if you take too small of a sliver, you're gonna get fucked. Like it doesn't work that way. And then if you um, hone in on it, in my opinion, too much, whether it's astrology or anything biblically, if you're like, this is the absolute,
Yeah.
that doesn't work either. And so I think that they all kind of come together, and that's really what's cool. It's like take a look at multiple different astrology and how does that line up with numerology. And I was having this conversation last night with a friend, and we were talking about how astrology, numerology, and biblically, a lot of things line up. And he was talking about how, like, the Bible is very number orientated and is
It
based
is.
off numerology and astrology, but most Christians won't accept that.
Mm-mm.
And so it's like really having like that whole picture and knowing that we are deciding what direction we're going in, but these things will have influence. It's kind of like you're deciding your life, but there's going to be people, situations that have influence over us. But at the end of the day, we pick.
Yeah, we can
So,
choose if those things have influence over us too. Because as I've said before on this podcast, one of the things that I'm currently in study mode for is I'm studying to be an NCS consultant for Dr. Joe Dispenza. And that's one of the biggest things that is in that course training is that there's 3 things that you have to overcome if you want to change your life, right? The first is your environment, your body, and your time. If any one of those 3 things controls you, if you allow those things to take control of you, and your environment is astrology, right? Like can also fall into the category of time as well, right? But if you allow any of those things to control you, then that's going to control what the outcome is. You're not controlling anymore. You've literally given your power to a person, place, thing, object, whatever at the end of the day.
yeah.
And that's one of the most, my favorite thing about Dr. Joe is that he's super empowering, right? The thing with, whenever I talk about astrology or I look at astrology, and I think that you would 100% agree with me on this, it's a really great insight as to what might happen, but I can always choose if I want to change that possibility as well.
Yeah.
And I can work with that energy to create what I want, or I can go, I want to work with it in order to create something slightly different too.
Mhm. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like you said, I really like what you said about the fact that like in the Bible, if you were just to say this is the only thing, like it always bothered me whenever I was studying the Bible. There is a lot of numbers in there, right? And now that I have learned a little bit more about numerology, I'm kind of like, damn, there's a lot of numbers in there, and they're in there for a specific reason because there's a lot of like Sevens. Seven is huge in the Bible. I feel like that was over and over and over and over again, right? 7 days of the week, and 7 times 70. There's so many sevens in there. And when you actually look at what a seven means in numerology, it's that trust and openness, being
Mhm.
open to whatever comes and trusting that that's what you actually need in that moment, right? I learned when I was a Christian that seven was the number of completeness, which now I'm looking back and I'm like, yeah, that's not quite right. Something was missing there. We were kind of like given a small piece of the puzzle. And I can understand how they got to the 7 days of the week, 7 times 70s, like that kind of thing. But it's like the Christians will look so deeply at this one thing and lose
Mhm.
the picture, lose the point of the whole picture, really. Like, because the point, if at the end of the day, in my opinion, the point of this existence is to learn a little bit more about ourselves, how, like, learn more about what love is and how to enjoy this creation that we've made. That's
Yeah.
it, in my opinion. Like, I don't know what else there really is at the end of the day. And I'm sure there's people out there that are like, no, there's more to it. I actually know there are, because I know that there are Christians out there that would probably be like, no, you have to love Jesus and only Jesus. And then bring other people to him, right? That's the only point of this existence. But at the end of the day, I feel like that's really just one minded, right? Instead of just saying, no, I'm just supposed to learn and enjoy. Like,
Yeah.
that's really open to your interpretation, not somebody else's interpretation for me. So,
Yeah. Yeah, so like I have a couple of things on that. So like seven is all about trust and openness. And like when you look at the themes in the Bible, it's all about trust and openness. That's what faith
yeah.
is being trusting and open. Like when you talk about like Jesus's miracles, that's all about trusting and being open to what's going to happen. Like what's going to happen if I keep breaking this bread? What's going to happen if I touch Jesus? I'm trusting that something good's going to happen. And then they say like you have that power too. And so we have to be trusting of ourselves that we are God and open to what we're going to receive. And so I think those themes are very relevant biblically for sure. But yeah, it's like that whole like sliver thing too, with like how you were talking about like astrology, like we get to decide like what we're taking from it. Um, and so if we're just looking at our life, like just simply like looking at what's in front of us, we have a very small vision line. Like if we're not tapping into astrology or meditation or numerology or infinite intelligence, and we're just like being, our actual perception of life is a very tiny sliver.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, that's where I really love. I'm not religious anymore. I don't believe that the Bible is the word of God, but I do believe there's a lot of truths in there. So I do like pulling from that. Um, I do love numerology. I do love astrology. And so for me, it just gives me a bigger vision instead of having a smaller sliver and not really knowing what's happening. And that's what I like about it. Like, I think whether Pluto is in Capricorn or Aquarius, my purpose is to learn how to have heaven and bliss on earth.
Yeah,
Like that's
absolutely.
and that's happiness and love, like you said.
Mhm.
And in my perception and my beliefs, for that to happen, we need to see governments fall and
Mhm.
systems fall. Like that's my perception. That's what I think needs to happen. And so to me, it makes sense that Pluto is in Aquarius based off of my perception of the world, my reality, and my lens, and the slivers that I have of my life in astrology and whatever else, right? So that makes sense to me. It makes sense to me that Trump is in power, whereas someone that is really about feminist rights and that kind of stuff, it's not going to line up with their slivers of how life works and what they want, because the female should have became the president and the misogynistic male shouldn't have been.
Mhm.
So it's really just about having that trust and openness and knowing, okay, these are the different things that are going on and how can I bring bliss and love to them.
100%. And I think that what you just said is how we create love, bliss, happiness in this current life, is to look at what we currently have and go, okay, might not be exactly what I wanted, but how do I make this the best ever? Right?
Yeah.
How do I, this might be a really awesome situation or it could be a really shitty situation. And I just need to trust and be open to what I've created for myself is what I actually need. And so I look back at my life and I look at it through this lens all the time because I'm like, if I hadn't had that thing happen that I didn't like, I wouldn't have gotten to this point in my life. I wouldn't have done this. I wouldn't have experienced that, right? Or you could also do it in the other way where it's like, oh, if that really awesome thing hadn't happened, then I also wouldn't be where I am right now, right? So it at the end of the day, it comes down to trusting
Yeah.
yourself in what you've created. This has been a really difficult learning for me to finally understand, but I finally have like grabbed hold and been like, okay, this is just what it is. So like when people around me, when I tell people about like situations that I'm going through, or even you, Ashley, you're telling me situations you're going through, it's like I have to trust myself that I created this for a reason. I
Mhm.
have to trust that there's something really good that I have created. And I'm saying good because there really is no right, wrong, good, bad. But at the end of the day, I do think that at the end of the day, I think we want to create some really monumental things. And so I think we just have to trust ourselves that those monumental things can come from seemingly quote unquote bad things that we've created in our universe as well.
Yeah. Well, and that was one of the conversations I had last night with this guy too, is like COVID was awful.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a rule follower. I don't like being forced. I don't like following. Like I don't like I love community, but I don't like having to do things a certain way. Like
Mm-hmm.
in kind of like that sheep mentality. I don't
Mm-hmm.
like that. It's really weird. I don't understand it completely, but like I hate Costco.
That's fair. I love Costco.
Like, you have to scan your card and you have to show your
Yeah.
receipt, all those things. I'm just like, no, like I want to have control over me and
Yeah.
just do me. And
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't know, it's weird. Um, and so COVID was really fucking hard for me.
Mm.
Like to not be able to go places and to have people that I care about losing jobs and like the whole thing. Like I had planned to come to you
I know. Yeah.
my
Yeah.
life would have been completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a big pill to swallow. And I was joking last night that I now have an even bigger pill to swallow
Mm.
as I have this person in my life that is awful to the four people that I care most about in the world. And in some ways, the court will always favor the biological mother. And I like that also is a hard pill for me to swallow because it shouldn't. And to me, that doesn't work. And people would say that to me over the last 4 years. I'm like, no, no, no. Like the court shouldn't. But it turned out in our situation that they did. When there's significantly more evidence against someone and next to no evidence against us, and somehow that still is still came out the way it did, that's the only conclusion that I can come to is that it just favors the biological mom. And I was like, okay, COVID prepped me in a way, because in a way I had to be compliant. I couldn't cross the borders. I couldn't go into places. And I pushed my boundaries a lot, but now I'm in a situation where once again, I have to be compliant in certain ways. And I still do push the boundaries. I don't let people walk all over me and all that kind of stuff. But there are certain things that I have to do that I do not agree with. And so COVID kind of prepped me for that, you know? And so there's some weird things like that. Like you'll be like, okay, that bad thing prepared me for this. And it wasn't that bad. We got through it. It is what it is. And that's where the whole like heaven on earth comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
But like, at the end of the day, like I can be completely blissful and have COVID. I
Mm-hmm.
can be or like have the COVID situation happen. I can be completely blissful and have a fucked up justice system with family court.
Mm.
And yeah, there's been times where I've crumbled under the weight of it, of the injustice or the negativity or whatever. But at the end of the day, I create that bliss and
Mm.
all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um,
Because I mean, I look at COVID and there was a lot that I was really grateful for
mhm.
because COVID allowed me to go into myself more, if that makes sense, because we weren't going out a lot. We weren't like spending tons of money traveling. There was really not much to do because things were closed down. I still had to work, but the other beautiful thing about that is that the hospital was a dead zone. Like there was nobody getting surgery. Like
Yeah.
I remember they cut our hours extremely at the hospital. They did some things that they probably shouldn't have because it really made some people mad and caused them to leave. But um, there was a lot more time for me to internally reflect. And I
Mhm.
am so grateful for that.
Yeah.
That is what I needed. I didn't need all the distractions outside of me. I needed to go internal and figure myself out because 2020 was really my year of like that clear vision, right? 2020 vision. That was me. I needed that. I needed that time to step back and just kind of figure out what I wanted in life, where I was going, what was happening, who I was, right? Like that was my real big turning point. That's when I started really meditating again. Um, and really getting back into who I was as a person because I'd been feeling like crap for years. And so, yeah, so for me, totally same situation, but also totally different at the same time. And that has to do with our perspective. So you're
Mhm.
talking about creating bliss and heaven no matter what the situation. I mean, we're two completely different people. We're really similar in a lot of ways, but for us to have like that same situation but have it affect us in such a different way, this is because of a perspective, right? Like how are we looking at it? And that perspective is what's going to create our heaven on earth or our hell on earth, right?
Yeah.
So I notice myself more than ever when I am thinking something that is not actually the direction I want to go. Maybe I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this right now. I'm like, wait a minute. I could keep thinking that thought, but it's going to cause a hell on earth if I'm if I'm constantly thinking, I don't want to do this right now, right?
Mhm.
That's causing my body to go into old subconscious programs of acting a certain way because I don't want to do something, right?
Mhm.
Instead, I can immediately be like, well, how do I change my perspective on this? No matter
Mhm.
what it is, how do I
Yeah.
change my thoughts and my feelings around this? Well, it's
Yeah.
got to start with the thought. So the thought is, how can I make this fun?
Mhm.
The best way, in my opinion, to figure out how to change a perspective is ask yourself a question because your brain wants to find the answer. Anytime you ask a question, how do I do XYZ? Your brain is searching for the answer and it's going to figure out an answer. So if you're
Mhm.
asking yourself the question, how do I make this fun? You're going to find a way
Yeah.
because and now you've just changed your entire energy around something. Now
Mhm.
instead of going into it feeling I don't want to do this, now you're feeling, ooh, let's. How do I make this fun? What do I do differently to make this really fun? And that just changes the whole game for us.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the other part too, is that like we don't have to be people pleasers. Like,
Mm,
like something bad is happening to you. It's not just about changing your feelings and changing your thoughts around it. Like you may have to be called to action. You may have to stand up to people around you. You may have to make things uncomfortable. And for me, like when I speak my truth about my politics, like I have some close friends that really don't agree with me and really don't like it, and so there's times and places where your actions and your thoughts are going to cause other people discomfort, but that's their choice
that's their
too, right?
choice. Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it's definitely not like a people pleasing situation or
Yeah.
everything is kindness and hunky dory,
Yeah, exactly. So,
So,
okay, so let me give an example of something that Matthew and I were talking about while we were at this Dr. Joe event. because this is something that he struggles with more than I do. But one of the things, like, we're both ex-Christians, we're both like completely deconstructed at this point. And for him, anytime somebody talks about Christianity, he immediately goes, ew, right?
Mhm.
Like, his immediate reaction is, why would anybody ever believe that? Right. And there's nothing wrong with having that thought. But for him, where it takes him is he's now against that person, which is
Mhm.
not, that's definitely not the direction we want to go. It's okay to be like, I don't agree with you, but I
Yeah.
can pleasantly agree to disagree. And that was something that we talked about while we were at the Dr. Joe event that we just came back from, where it was
Yep.
like, maybe a better way to look at somebody that has a different perspective, like Christianity, that you used to fall into, but now you don't. Maybe
Yep.
it's like, well, they're allowed to have their opinion. I
Mhm.
have my opinions, and I'm allowed to have my own opinions as well. And that,
Yep.
for me, when I have that thought, that immediately makes me feel better. And I don't
Mhm.
have to feel like I'm for or against anyone, because
Mhm.
that for or against, that division, just creates more division and more duality, which at the end of the day is not, that's not healthy and helpful for any of us in order to create that higher vibrational frequency.
Well, and that's the thing too. It's like, how do you know what steps you would have taken
Mm.
unless you actually walked every day in their shoes? You
Mm.
know,
Yeah.
like had I had the exact upbringing, the exact situations with peers at school, all of those kind of things, would I actually think any differently than them? You
Right.
know?
Exactly.
And so that's where it's like, I can't say that they're wrong, because they have a completely different lens and a completely different life experiences that have got them to where they are. And that's the fun thing about relationships too. Like even like with me and Derek, like a lot of our struggles, we're understanding, okay, well, this is happening this way because you're seeing it through this lens.
Mhm.
And like it has gotten us into some pretty dark places because we have been brought up in completely different situations and then had completely different young adult lives. And so it took a long time for us to understand, okay, that person's acting that way and responding that way and thinking that way because of this, because they're so vastly different.
Mhm.
And then even like with my friend, like we had a conversation when Trump came in to presidency. When, how long ago was that? Like 3 weeks ago?
Well, he's not president yet. He will be January 20th. So
Oh.
Biden is still, he's considered a lame duck right now because there's not much that he can do. He still can do stuff, but it's like he's kind of like just there at this point. So he won't be president until January.
And that's the inauguration.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
Yeah.
I'm like I hear these words, but I don't
I
really
know,
know.
yeah. I get it. I honestly don't know much about Trudeau, so I get it.
And I don't either, guys. I don't want to know.
I get it. I feel like that's how I feel about all politicians. I don't really want to know.
So when was your election then?
Our election was November 6th or 5th, something
Okay.
like that. Yeah, so it's
So
it's it's a little while until Trump is
yeah, so like
actually.
2 weeks ago, me and my friend were having this conversation, and we just like blatantly disagreed and then left it at that and didn't have like any kind of closure to the conversation. And I'm like, well, I really hope that wasn't negative on our friendship in any way.
Mm,
And I'm like, but I'm pretty confident I know her and we're good. And yesterday she came up and gave me a hug and she's like, I just wanted to make sure we were good. And I'm like, okay, like, like we're on the same
yeah,
page, you know?
yeah,
And that's what I think is like really important is like we're allowed to have those differences in
yeah.
opinions. And that's also what's important. Like I'm kind of like that I am that conspiracy theorist
Mm,
where I think the man wants us to stay compliant and go to school the way we do so we can work the way we do so the rich can stay rich and the poor can stay poor. Like I truly believe that that is how our society is built. And so for me, when my parents like when I was being raised in my parents' home, like money was like, you do not fucking talk money. Like it
Mm.
is completely off limits. My dad won't even tell my mom what's in certain bank accounts.
Oh, wow. Huh.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
Like he's just so he was raised like in a very financially abusive situation by his dad and his grandpa.
Hmm.
And so yeah, he like literally hides money, and that's just what he does. And it's like a safety thing for him, a coping mechanism for him, like trauma, like all the things. And
Hmm.
so my mom was like, you need, like, my dad's dealing with cancer, you need to put all this stuff in writing so I know where to find it or something.
Right. Yeah, you
And
can't squirrel it
yeah,
all away.
yeah.
You can't.
And I'm sure it's all in their will and everything like that, because my dad is not a stupid person and he's very proactive and wants to take care of his family. But still, like, you don't talk about money, you don't talk about politics, and you don't talk about religion. And I've had this conversation multiple times. I might have even brought it up on Zoom. And like, the man doesn't want us to have the conversations about politics, religion, or money, because what keeps us ignorant and what keeps us down. And the more we talk about it, the more we understand it, the more we hear different perspectives and different opinions, the more powerful we are, and we can literally come together with our differences. But if we all keep separate and we don't talk about it and we say hush hush, we have no power, we have no authority, and we have no ability to change. And so I think that it's so important to have those conversations. And like we talk about on our podcast a lot, we talk about money, we talk about religion, and we talk about politics, because those conversations are some of the most important conversations to have to be able to elevate our life and change our circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, and at the end of the day, having at least some knowledge about something can actually cause us. This is another Dr. Joe thing. I can't go too deep because I'm not NCS certified yet, but having new knowledge allows us to make new choices. Like those new, it allows us to have these new thoughts that allow us to make new choices. And
Yeah.
so if we keep staying in the same frame of knowledge, we'll continue to live our lives under that same frame of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Like we're not going to have a new thought. We're not going to make new choices, right? So ultimately, our life just stays the same when we do that. So curiosity is a beautiful thing. And asking questions of people. One of my favorite things to do when I don't agree with somebody is just to ask questions because I'm like, maybe they know something I don't.
Oh, 100%.
Maybe
And
they know
I
something I
think
don't.
the people that, like my one friend I was talking about, me and her see most things differently.
Mm,
But at the end of the day, like we both come from a place of love. So our core belief is the same. But like when we talk about transgender or like those kind of things, like socialism or politics, very different.
mhm,
But when I struggle with something, like when I struggle with the whole like transgender issues, like certain specific ones, not all, she gives me a different perspective. And I'm like, okay, I
mhm.
never thought of it that way. I can accept that a lot easier now.
Yeah.
And so I think it's so important. And two, like a lot of people with religious beliefs won't agree with me on this, but like politics, religion, and money are at the end of the day meaningless, you
Mm,
know? Like
absolutely. Absolutely.
that's the other thing. Like we give way too much power to all of them,
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter.
Yeah. And that kind of like to tie it back to the astrology thing and like, which astrology chart should we go by? At the end of the day, it kind of falls into that same thing of does it really matter? Does
Yeah.
that really fall in my life purpose? Not
Yeah.
really. You know, like if
Yeah.
we're looking at life through the lens of my goal here on this 3D plane is to learn and discover and create my bliss, no, nothing else falls in there. Like nothing, that's it. Like that's all there is. So does it really matter if Pluto is in Aquarius or Capricorn or wherever the fuck else it wants to go? I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
It's what makes those people happy, you know?
yes.
Like my friend, like if you were to say like, oh, you should never do astrology again, like that would be taking a piece of her happiness.
Yeah.
Just like I get happiness from dyeing my hair, you know, I get happiness when I have numerology happening, or when my intuition is like fucking on point. Like those things bring me happiness, you know? And so at the end of the day, does it really matter? No. Because I can find bliss without all those things, but they add to it, like just based off of who I am after all the experiences I've had.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I think this was a good conversation. And I think we're going to wrap it up for today. So, friends, if you are listening to us on YouTube, go ahead and give us a like, subscribe. Let us know what your thoughts are, because we packed this one with a lot of different concepts, which we always do. We always go down a bunny trail somehow. So leave us a comment. Let us know your thoughts. And then if you're listening to us on your favorite podcast host, go ahead, give us a 5-star and leave us a question or a comment once again. So with that, we're going to call TMI, Advice You Didn't Want, a wrap for today. Thanks so much for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue hanging out with us, and don't forget to subscribe.